If strength training does more to improve fat loss, shouldn't we strength train more often? And that is the question I'm answering today. That question is so logical and thoughtful. And yet, I realized when getting that question from a community member the other day in a live Q&A with our Flipping 50 membership that I needed to make a point of clarity. So here it is for anybody listening. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top concerns and struggles when exercising in menopause. I share what to eat and how to move, and how to change your mindset about both of those and some other things so you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. So let's dive in and let me tell you this. A little secret is this is not the podcast I had planned to deliver today. I was about to prepare a 10 things we learned about exercise, and specifically, of course, for you who are in midlife during COVID and or the pandemic, shall we say. So as I was writing all of those, I stumbled across this one about frequency of training and realized that I have some work to do. So a nod and shout out to Cary, who asked this question originally, making me fully aware that the message isn't completely getting across. And that is my fault, and I'm about to correct it. Before I dive in, let me tell you that this episode is brought to you by the Flipping 50 Fitness Specialist. I'm having such a great time. This is a bonus day in a 5-day Build Your Business Bootcamp for fitness trainers and health coaches who are either finding themselves at this space of needing to be heard and be seen and be found by the right people during this onslaught of post-pandemic. Everybody's online, but that means all of your competitors are online too. And what do I do? Because as a dual passion of mine, working with women in midlife, but it's also up-leveling the quality and the availability of good choices for you in the fitness industry, whether you're looking for a coach to work with you one-on-one or across the world via Skype or Zoom, it doesn't matter. But you've got to have good choices. And there are a lot of trainers out there marketing themselves as midlife or menopause coaches, but they don't actually know the training to pull together all of the things that you need. You've got considerations on hormones. You've got considerations to make on the body you've lived in for decades, and the joints and the ligaments and the tendons and the history of injury or vulnerability of it, and your specific needs and wants and goals right now in this moment and what they will be in 10 and 20 years. You need someone who can factor in all of it. Not someone who's still wet behind the ears with brand new certification and is following general or generic guidelines based on men and women of all ages. You have a unique hormone, metabolism, body composition, and even socialization that require some extra TLC. And that's what we teach in the Flipping 50 Fitness Specialist. I'm actually taking a group of women, yes, midlife women who are female trainers and coaches through a 10-month Build Your Business program. We want to support them so that they're there to support all of you. So if you're interested yourself in becoming a coach, you are a coach, and I know you're out there, now's the time to jump in because these guys are having a great time and they've grown so much in 5 days. And they're getting the understanding of what it takes to build and grow. All right. And by the way, it's a lot of fun when you do it correctly. It feels good. Let's dive back in. So in clarifying this question for you, it is not the strength training activity. So let me go back and rephrase a question from Cary in our community. If strength training does more to improve fat loss or body composition, shouldn't we strength train more often? And it was such a logical, thoughtful question. So it's important that you realize this. It is not the strength training activity, not the session. It is the result of proper strength training that increases your lean muscle mass, decreases your fat, and therefore improves your body composition. So let's unpack what I just said. It's not the strength training session. It is the result of proper strength training. And that's a loaded statement. Your question right now, I'm hoping, is what is proper strength training? And here we go. Let me answer that. Great question, by the way. So it's important that you realize it's not the 10 or the 20 or the 40 minutes that you spend doing the strength training per session that improves your fat loss, your lean muscle loss prevention, which happens with age unless you're doing something about it, and therefore improves your body composition. Proper strength training is this formula. So I know, does it feel like, how ironic, please, that you're in algebra, I'm at the chalkboard writing it down. So this is the one and only time I would have been asked to do that, just so you know. Adequate stimulus during the strength training session plus adequate recovery after a session equals positive anabolic muscle response. Anabolic. What's that word mean? It means rebuilding, repairing. The opposite of anabolic is catabolic. So sounds like catabolism, right? Sounds even like cannibalism, and it is. It means your muscle is breaking down at a faster rate than it's building up. And if you are even familiar dabbling with what is osteoporosis, well, that bone turnover and regeneration that happened when we were younger, and the regeneration happened faster than the breakdown did. Well, that no longer happens. Now we've got more breakdown happening and less regeneration. And that's why bone loss is so key, or preventing. It's key to the development of osteopenia, which is on its way to osteoporosis and makes us so much more vulnerable to fractures. I liken that to a pancake. You're making pancakes, and hopefully you're really not, unless it's a high protein pancake. But as they cook in the pan, there's all of this bubbling going on, right? And it's kind of a constant in motion thing. When you first pour that batter in, you watch the bubbles appear and disappear. And that's kind of what's going on in bone. But, with your pancake, it firms up and you eventually make it, finish it, and you have something to bite into. But when bone doesn't do that as well, it's more like the effect of Swiss cheese, a lot more holes than there are actually bone. So the same thing can happen to muscle. If you don't allow the proper stimulus, or if you don't allow proper recovery, and that's where most of us are at fault, especially those exercise lovers out there. I know you're there, and I love it too. I love the feeling of the workout and how I feel right after. I feel stronger. I feel more resilient. It's so much about the mental feeling above the shoulders as much as it is below. Yeah, feels good to feel good naked in front of the mirror, right? Turn the lights on, leave the lights on, all the things. We want to be there, right? You want to have somebody capture a picture of you, say, diving into a swimming pool or easing yourself in, but swimming away, and like the rear view. We all want that. But it's really how you feel that drives you back to get it more and more. And here's where we can make our mistakes. Too much doesn't allow that rebuild and repair. And it doesn't matter how great the workout was, even how great it felt, if there's not enough rebuilding. So let's break down each one of these pieces. And I'm going to restate that formula. Adequate stimulus during the strength training session. We'll start there. Plus adequate recovery after a session. That'll be next. That equals your positive anabolic, your rebuilding and muscle response repair. All right. So what is adequate stimulus during the strength training session? That's overload of the muscle to a point of temporary muscular fatigue. You're lifting that weight and you realize, I cannot get that up one more time. My muscles are saying, no, no, please put that down. And it won't allow you to go the full range of motion. It's done or can be done with a heavy weight and lower rep ranges, meaning, listen, you are not broken. So don't ask me this question, all right? Well, what should I lift because I'm 60? Stop it. I don't know. There are some 60-year-old women who can lift more than I can, and there are some who can lift less, and there are some who can lift about the same. And we're closer than you think, right? So I believe, if I'm counting correctly, it's a time warp, but I'm going to celebrate 58 this year. So as much as it doesn't feel like a fit, because I'm sure I would have imagined 58 to be very differently, or feeling very differently than I do now, you get the idea. I'm a lot closer now to 60 than I was, or than I am to 50. Who knew? All right. But you've got to get to that temporary muscle fatigue. So what you can do is you can do heavy weights. You could fatigue at 3 or fewer repetitions. I do that during workouts. It's not generally the first set because you want to be well warmed up before you pick a heavy weight up. But it might be during my third set. And I might have done, say, 10 to 12 in the first set, did a heavier weight and couldn't do quite as many in the second set. And then in that third set, I'm picking up a heavier weight, one I really don't love, and I'm not doing very many repetitions, but they're done well with good form to fatigue. So that first point, overload to a point of temporary muscle fatigue. If your muscles are not getting fatigued, you could do more. You're not quite there. And this is important, that this is not all over tired. This is muscular fatigue. You're in the middle of an exercise and you can no longer lift that weight. Now, if you're doing something like battling ropes, you have your hands, and if you don't know what that means, let this one pass by, not important. But if you've used battling ropes, you have your hands on a long rope, it's heavy and weighted, and you're going up and down, and it's probably at a gym. You may not be doing this one at home, but you're going up and down. That includes you're standing on your feet, you're in a squat position, you've got your core activated, your arms are working, your shoulders potentially could be overworking. That's common. But you may find, I'm just tired, I'm just done. There's no one muscle working. Now, some would call that's very functional. And it's true. However, it does not necessarily support you getting to clear muscle fatigue. That might be a piece of what you do in a workout, but you should also be doing some chest presses, some rowing, some squats, some lunges, and not only doing what's called often functional movement. So if you only isolate those kinds of exercises and a trainer is saying, no, 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 we're not going to ever do squats or lunges or get you on a leg press machine because it's not functional. If it's tied to your goals, it's functional. And those machines and those heavier weights and doing a little bit more of some traditional exercises boosts your body composition far more than functional only workouts. Now, that said, we all need some function. I'll come back to that at the end. All right. Another component of adequate stimulus during strength training is it includes as many major muscle groups as possible. So, point taken about what I just said. That's a full body routine, though. So you don't want to break it up. If you are doing, or some trainer has you doing 4 days a week and you're doing lower body some days, or you're doing lower body and your back on some days, and you're doing some lower body and your chest on other days, twice a week you're doing those kinds of workouts, you're not getting adequate stimulus of your metabolism. You want to be doing 2 very high quality lower body and upper body combined workouts. That will give you the most bang for your buck. You don't get off schedule when you're busy or you miss as much as you do if you're doing a split routine. And unless you can really spend a lot of time in the gym doing those split routines, you're probably not making as much progress. So, for women in midlife, for the biggest metabolism bust, you want full body, not upper body one day, lower body the next. Got it? All right, moving on. And it includes compound exercises. And compound exercises are many of the things that I just described to you, and I'll repeat those. But compound exercises are those that are two joints or more are involved in the exercise. So think about a squat. Actually, there's ankles, they have to flex and extend. Your knees and your hips are involved. And that means you have more muscles crossing more joints that are involved in the activity. So in a squat, we're using your glutes, we're using your quadriceps on the top of your thigh, your hamstrings on the back of your thigh, and to some extent, we're using your lower legs, not really using your calves as much, but in stabilization, some of the smaller muscles of your lower body. But it's those major muscles, hamstrings, quadriceps, glutes, that we're really targeting. Similarly, with an upper body exercise, a chest press, for instance, would be a compound exercise. A chest fly would not be. So you will find in Flipping 50 Stronger programs, very rarely do I encourage a fly because it's a single joint exercise. It may be strategically used here and there, but it's definitely not a staple. I focus on chest press, so many variations. So single arm, both arms, going unilaterally back and forth so that there's different ways of stimulating those muscle fibers and your mind. There's no boredom. You can't just go on autopilot and do this exercise. But likewise with a bent over row, so in the opposite direction. So unless you're at home and you have lots of equipment to use, like a cable machine, or you have a rowing machine, most of us are going to be doing some kind of a bent over row, either seated or standing, to work on those muscles in our back. But as you do that, what are you using? There's joint action at your shoulder and joint action at your elbow, getting to that pulling that happens across the large muscles of your back. So there you have it. Adequate stimulus includes overload of the muscle to the point of temporary fatigue, whether for you because of your history, you're a beginner or you're not, or conditions, joint issues you might have. You either do that with heavy weight, few reps, or you do it with lighter weight and lower and higher rep ranges. Sorry, almost failed to get that one correct as I spoke. But also, I want you to know that I'm capable of doing heavy weights and lower reps, and I do. But I also will give my body a variety and stimulus because a body will adapt to whatever it's given on a regular basis and then fail to change further. You've got to change it up very often. So let's move on. What was the second part of that formula? We've covered adequate stimulus during the strength training session. Here's where Cary's question should get filled in. If you do not have adequate recovery after a session, you will be missing one of the key components in positive anabolic muscle response. So let's talk about that. What is adequate recovery following a strength session? And the purpose of all of the following things I'm about to give you is to improve that anabolism, which is repair and rebuilding of the muscle following the active breakdown that occurs during the workout. During exercise of any kind, the muscles experience stress and micro tears. So we can agree, I'm sure, that different levels and types of exercise increase or decrease the amount of tears. So if you're going to swim, for instance, you're going to do a light and easy swim and you're used to it. We've got to say that. That's going to you'll experience very much less muscle tearing because it's a gentle activity. And unless you've really overdone what your body is used to as far as laps go, you could cause some stress through the shoulders and upper body, but otherwise, very easy on the body. It's a great recovery activity, in fact. But let's also say you were running and you're used to running maybe 3 miles, 2 or 3 miles regularly, a couple times a week. You go out and you run 8. That's going to give you quite a bit of muscle stress and micro tearing beyond what you were used to, right? Likewise with strength training. During any kind of exercise, there's going to be more micro training when you reach that temporary muscle fatigue. That is desirable. Make no mistake. You want that because when the body recovers, it doesn't just repair to its original state. It overcompensates to be prepared for the next stressor, which is your next workout. So if you've ever trained for a 5K, you have experienced this. When you start, maybe you're not able to complete more than a mile. And then over time, you can gradually do more and more until you're able to do the entire 3.1 miles, no problem. Or let's say you've started a weight training program and you're using a 5-pound weight when you start. Maybe it's all you had sitting around the house. And a few weeks later, you realize I'm not getting tired at the end of the set when I'm using those 5 pounds. So I probably need more. What's happened is exactly what I've described. Your body has overcome that initial resistance and now it will require more. That's the whole philosophy of exercise. By imposing exercise intensities that otherwise are not present in your daily activities of life, your body then says, daily living, I have tons of energy. I can do what I need to do. This is no big deal. And that's why at the end of a work day, end of a busy day, you still have energy to do more. And if, dear girlfriend, that's not the case, let's take a look at the exercise and at the recovery practices you've got in place, because that is possible for every woman at every age. There you have it. Okay, so those 3 big components of adequate recovery. And there are so many things, some of which I've included in the chapter on rest and recovery in You Still Got It, Girl. I talk about baths. I talk a little bit more about swimming and kinds of workouts, exercise and movement that you can do between hard workouts. It's not that you should be sitting on the couch. Absolutely not. Active recovery is good. I talk about foam rolling. I talk about getting a massage. I talk about taking Epsom salt baths. And I talk about these 3 things. First one is adequate calories. I know you've been told and conditioned over and over that it's calories in, calories out. And many of you may be wanting to lose weight. Specifically, that's either caught up with you and you're realizing I've got to do something now before I get older because it's going to get harder, not easier, or that caught you in midlife and you've never had to deal with it before. But a calorie deficit may be created because of activity, because of reduced calories in and activity, or because of simply reduced activity or calories, sorry. So let me restate that. A caloric deficit you could create because of activity alone. So you eat the same, but you start exercising. It's going to be different because of reducing your calories as well as your activity, or by just reducing calories. That's the least fun of all, by the way. And during times of stress, from menopause, from loss of sleep, from stressful life situations, careful adherence to an abundant micronutrient dense food stores or availability over strict calorie deficit is the better goal. So if you're choosing focus on eating the highest quality food, the quantity will tend to take care of itself. Now, I know that's not true for all of us. Emotional eating is a real thing. So shout out to my friend, Trisha Nelson, who is Heal Your Hunger. And she's no stranger to Flipping 50, to the Flipping 50 members. She's one of our expert interviews. But in general, if you're not dealing with an emotional issue, if you will focus on micronutrient dense foods instead of having a strict calorie deficit, you will find that the food and the quantity solve their own problem. Okay, let's move on. So, adequate calories is one. You need the adequate calories. So, you can reduce to some extent. Most of us probably have a little wiggle room to do that, but don't go too low. So, adequate protein is number two, and especially in the presence of lower calories. So, if you are consciously reducing the amount of calories that you take in, adequate protein is absolutely required so that you don't lose muscle weight. And let's be clear, whenever you lose weight, you lose a portion of fat, you lose a portion of muscle. That percentage can go as high as 50% of the weight you lose could be muscle, or it can stay low, say 15%. And if it's just 1.5 or lower, you can offset those losses by doing things like strength training in order to compensate and improve your body composition optimally. So protein needs, pay very close attention. If you're away, you've drifted, come back to me. Protein needs increase with age due to muscle protein synthesis decline. Your body doesn't process protein that you eat as well as it did when you were younger. On a per meal basis, this is important, 30 to 40 grams. Yeah, you heard me right. 30 to 40 grams of high quality protein at breakfast, at your morning meal, whether that's at 11 a.m. or it's at 8 a.m. or 7 or 6, depending on your schedule and what time you get up and get going and get hungry. But that high quality protein at an early breakfast morning or a morning meal, and again at dinner or slightly higher even at dinner, along with a modest protein meal midday, can support muscle protein synthesis best. So I'm used to telling women 30 grams 3 times a day, and that is generally what I start with for women. So we look at one thing first, and it is usually that. Let's get it here. And we step by step that. So if you're used to consuming, say, 10 or 15 grams of protein at a meal, and you may not even realize that's what you're doing, but if you have, say, a couple of eggs, you've got 12 grams of protein, and that's it, girl. And guess what? If you need more muscle, more lean, and less fat in your midlife, it's not enough. So you want to start stepping your way to that, because protein will make you more sated, more satisfied, more full easily. And it'll take a little time for you to adapt mentally as well. And I totally understand that. So let's take a look at this. The 24 hours following a strength training workout. So think about it. When was your last workout? Those 24 hours after, it's like, I'm an Iowa girl. So if you imagine cornfields in the middle of July in a streak of days with no rain, what happens is the leaves on the corn stand up, or they're like, any drop of rain, I need to catch it. I need it to come in here and grab it. And nature is such a cool thing, right? Essentially, your muscles are doing exactly the same thing for protein. They're like, I'm ready. I'm open. Throw me the ball. I got this one. And only if you get adequate protein and a little bit more protein than you're used to having in that 24 hours afterward can you really optimize the workout. So your muscle protein synthesis is lower when you're in your midlife, and as you get older, it declines. But a ripe opportunity is number one, resistance training improves your muscle protein synthesis and the timing of that protein. So, waiting about 60 minutes, having it at about 90 minutes after a workout, a challenging workout to muscular fatigue is perfect. And continuing to increase your protein at each of your meals and just get overall a higher intake during those 24 hours of protein than you do normally can be very helpful in boosting your muscle protein synthesis. And a lot of women will go through a program and say, what's happening? I'm not actually gaining lean muscle. I feel like I've lost lean muscle. Well, part of it is they may be causing themselves breakdown. Maybe not sleeping or prioritizing sleep. That's going to give you some problems with breakdown. You've got more cortisol and you've got less growth hormone and testosterone. And if you're not getting that protein, you're barely getting the minimum, I would bump that up right away and just look closely. During this workout, did I truly fatigue? So it's both the stimulus and the rest. So, in fact, cycling protein intake over the weeks of the month, if you're still experiencing a regular menstrual cycle, or if you're in menopause, this is also appropriate. We still want to say, okay, week 1, week 2, week 3, let's take you through a cycle. That can improve your body composition significantly, meaning there are weeks when you're going to consume more protein and do more strength training during those weeks, and weeks when you're going to consume more moderate protein again, some weeks when you should just be doing lighter endurance workout and not really pushing it. And you probably have experienced those premenstrual times when you either feel I've got more fatigue, I've got a little bit more bloating, and you might be trying to push things, but actually recovery and rest may be the ideal. And then as soon as you start, you've got that elevated strength and energy, and you feel stronger potentially than ever during that week of the month. What we're doing with Flipping 50 programs, a brand new one coming out for March 1st, that'll be in our members only area, is really cycling through these things, consciously thinking about your protein intake 1 week and your strength training and how they work in tandem and complement each other. So the type of training you do and the protein you consume both together dramatically improve results for many women, even in their 60s. Okay, third piece of adequate recovery is adequate rest between muscle re-stimulus, meaning your next workout. Without adequate rest, anabolism, that's rebuilding for the muscle, will not be allowed to happen. Without enough time between coming back to the muscles again with a hard workout, the repair cannot happen. Imagine having the flu, and God forbid, in this year, that's probably a really poor example, but imagine the last time you were sick or ill and you're a busy person. And when you start feeling better, you get back into your regular routine, but you find yourself having to sit down. You actually get dressed, you take a shower. It's been a couple of days in bed, and you're like, I've got to sit down, right? And that's about all you've got energy for. It sounded so good, right? But physically, your body's not quite ready yet. That's really kind of what happens when you exercise. Unfortunately, though, you may not feel it. There are some hints. So let me tell you this. If you're going into your next tough workout, whether it's a high intensity interval training workout or it's a strength training workout, and you're still sore or tired. So it can be muscle soreness, or it can be just like overall, you're still tired. I'm not really feeling it. That can be your body telling you, listen, I'm not fully recovered. And the amount of time it takes for someone to recover is increased when we're 40, 50, 60, and 70. That time increases from when you were younger. It's not the same. And it doesn't mean you can't work as hard during the workout. You can and you should. Don't compromise and muddy the water. So do less often. Poor, bad combination. Do the workout, do the tough workout, do the recovery. You're doing all the things when you do it that way. Your muscle without full recovery will experience more muscle wasting than repair. And you may be losing muscle even while you're exercising regularly. So I want you to review. All right, with me right here. What happens if you strength train too often or you strength train more often? To sum it up, recovery included not only in the time between your sessions, but even in the time between your sets of exercise and a workout. That requires consideration of your nutrition, meaning adequate calories, adequate protein, your life stressors, and the quality of your sleep. That is the ultimate rest and recovery. So, strength training twice a week to muscle overload that causes temporary muscle fatigue that allows about 72 hours between for recovery is optimal. That fits easily into most busy women's schedules, and it allows the energy and the desire for more movement in every day that ultimately prevents obesity far more than a frequent exercise schedule that leads to couch compensation because you are just tired. So it's becoming an active person that carries over most. Increasing your lean muscle tissue, yes, and you're gonna need to exercise, but you wanna do that exercise not to get better at the exercise in the gym and then slouch the rest of the day, but to boost your energy so you wanna be active all day. What does work? Adding a third workout in the middle of two heavier sessions. If you're someone who wants to exercise a little bit more frequently, you can do that, specifically strength train more frequently. If, say, Monday and Friday, those are your heavy lifting days, you've got at least 72 hours in between. And on Wednesday, you do more of a functional exercise session. When you do functional movements, you should be doing slightly lighter weights than you do slow, controlled movements to muscular fatigue. So it requires less recovery. So by Wednesday, you should be fine for that workout. And in fact, doing overall movement may help you passively recover. And by Friday, you've had just 48 hours. However, again, it's functional and you don't need quite as much recovery. That's the workout where you're going to do and include more rotation, more multi-movement, multi-plane movement. So flexion, extension, yes, we do that, but lateral movement, rotation simultaneously in many cases, and doing things unilaterally or one-sided is a smart way to go. Many of the programs inside Flipping 50 focus and feature those things because not only do they improve your balance while you're doing them, make you aware of any muscle imbalances you might have from left to right or front to back, but they also allow you to exercise and reach muscular fatigue with a lighter weight load, which is optimal when you're exercising at home. And you can reach that point of fatigue even though you don't have stacks and stacks of weights at home, or it doesn't require you to hold on to super heavy weights for your lower body in order to fatigue that while stressing your shoulders, so your upper back and your neck muscles. There are lots of ways safely around what it is we want you to do. So, who is most fit? Really, it's that woman who has the energy to play golf, clean the house, entertain grandchildren at the park, or to learn to dance or stand up paddleboard that ultimately spends far more calories than an exerciser who sits all day with no energy to do or too sore to do more. So, I'm going to include some additional podcasts that you may find interesting. Some prior guests who both talked about protein needs, talked about protein synthesis, and who talk about the need for resistance training and how beneficial it is in conjunction with muscle protein synthesis and the intake and timing of protein. I'll put those 3 episodes in the show notes. And if you're looking for a way to start and at a loss for how do I begin this? How do I plan a week? I'll put the link to the 5-day flip in the show notes. That's 5 days of short exercise videos taking about 15 minutes or less. And I'll give you 2 strength training workouts within that and 2 more interval training, but very doable, even if you're a beginner. Or who else needs this? It's not just somebody starting, but often it's a woman who everything I'm doing is making me exhausted. I'm not seeing any weight loss, not seeing any belly fat changes. And we probably need to bring you back just a step to restore before more. But if it's really hard to simply rest, you can do much less exercise. Still be telling yourself, I'm moving correctly, but I'm just going to take a break from what I know is not working and try something new. That's the 5-day flip. And I'll put that in the show notes. There you have it. It's all about flipping50.com/strength train more often. How to, should you, and if you do, what would that look like? I hope that's been helpful. And I hope that abandoning what I was actually going to do today has been a good detour for us both. And I'll let you know that on the YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/flipping50TV. I will be posting that entire list of 10 things we've learned during the pandemic about exercise. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.